Welcome back. Thrilled to be here, as always, with Joe Amador and a very special guest. I feel like we've been very fortunate to say that a few times on this series, Joe. But we're joined here by Sam, Sam, you could probably give us an update now, but previously the CEO of BrainBox AI, who have now recently been acquired by Trane. So, Sam, firstly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lewis. Thank you, Joe, for having me.
I know it's a super busy time, but we're stoked to get you on. Lots of key talking points that, rightly so, were highlighted during the acquisition, and I imagine it's still a very exciting time for the business. Should we spend the first couple of minutes just teeing yourself up for an introduction?
Sure. Happy to do so. So, Lewis, Joe, you're well-known faces in the industry. On our side, maybe a little less so. But Sam Ramadori, CEO of BrainBox AI, joined the BrainBox adventure about 5.5 years ago. And I think most people know Jean-Simon Venn, our CTO and original. And over the last 5.5 years, we're based in Montreal, but we've been growing the company with a presence in Canada, but also in the US, and really focused on applying really the latest capabilities that AI is delivering to us. And this, starting back 7 years ago, you can imagine it was fairly early on, right? Deep learning neural networks were just getting going, and they're delivering opportunities that just doesn't exist without that technology. And now, obviously, with the boost in generative AI, further delivering other capabilities, but that put AI in the hands of everyone, really, right? Before generative AI, you would have had to have some kind of knowledge to be able to see and use it, whereas now it's a completely different game. And so we've been at it a total of 7-8 years, developing, constantly trying to put out new capabilities. The team has grown, and as you mentioned, just about a month ago, we closed an exit or acquisition by Trane Technologies, and now we're in full integration mode.
Yep. And so, I mean, when we get to the core of the BrainBox technology, a lot of it's focused on the HVAC side. And I think a lot of people probably realize why that's significant, but maybe just for a second, if you want to talk, HVAC being a large component of energy in buildings, a lot of waste, but there's probably more to share, just to tee up.
Yeah, look, the DNA, every startup, every company, but every startup has its core culture. And really, right at the beginning in its founding, there was the word impact, right? Like, in theory, you could say we're going to develop something and then connect to all the building systems. But at the end of the day, I mean, the technology and making it work is hard enough. So really, the desire was to really focus where we can have the most impact. And so what do you think? HVAC is by far the largest. Is it 40%? Is it 50%? Maybe in another continent, it'll be 30%, but it's still a huge number. In your mind, would the second number have been lighting? Probably in the good old days.
Yeah, lighting, but lighting obviously has been become more efficient because of LEDs. I mean, at this point, it was like the clearest payback in a lot of cases in a lot of buildings.
Yeah, exactly. And so then, it only became more clear that this needed to be tackled. And we'd like to remind people the other element too is the variable. Not only is it the biggest load, if it was at least stable day in and day out, you'd say not bad. You find a way to manage it. But I mean, lighting is relatively stable. Heating and cooling could move dramatically, one day to the next, and seasonally, but even one day to the next. So really, we got to find a way to make that big beast that also is very volatile and do something with it. And whatever number you want to use, there's been a study by Berkeley on what the average waste in a building is. It's not 5%. It's not 8%. It's usually 20, 30%. It's an enormous number. 10, 15 years ago, as long as someone was willing to pay the bill, did it really matter? Maybe not. But nowadays, forget it. There's one reason on top of the other. Climate being the number one. That is a core part of our reason for existence. Now let's add on, the pressure from data centers and all the rest. Like every 2-3 years, heat pumps, right? Everything's going electric.
Right.
So every 2-3 years, let's have another reason why we need to make it more efficient. And also to kind of control that variability, or at least understand that variability. So that truly was the DNA. And we have not, despite being 8 years, we have not said, okay, we're suddenly going to start doing lighting as a core function feature. But we're still really focused on where.
Or plug loads are probably maybe number 3 or number 4, which are probably the hardest, would be the hardest to manage, I would think. But I say it in jest. That was another kind of building on that point. You kind of touched on this. You have a lot of different types of buildings. If you dig into those buildings, as well as we do, there's different types of HVAC systems in those buildings. At the core, it's all the refrigeration cycle, chillers versus rooftops versus, you mentioned heat pumps, and now you have heat pump chillers. You have mini splits, you have a whole host of, and you can somewhat point those towards different types of buildings. Big buildings typically have a chilled water plant, hospitals absolutely. How do you think through like where the technology applies, or does it apply to all of them? And yeah, I'll start there.
Yeah, I mean the really interesting part about AI, and we're seeing it more and more now, is its scalability, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if generative AI can learn almost every piece of data on the internet, I mean, it's already proven its
Yeah.
capability to ingest and learn. In our case, it was really when you look at the core capability, which is we're going to plug into a building, its system,
Yeah.
its HVAC system. We're going to extract data in real time, marrying it with external data, and then let's start producing capabilities that matter, that are really
Yeah.
impactful. So number one, we learn a building. When the learning's done, we can forecast the thermal behavior in each HVAC zone of that building. We use a 6-hour out period, just relevance on HVAC decision making. But the forecast is incredibly accurate, well above 95%, typically touching 99% accuracy. So right
Yeah.
away, boom, you've given the HVAC system a view of the future when today it just knows what the thermostat is saying right now. But what's really interesting is that it's AI. As long as you're able to organize the models, have them running, whether it's a retail store with 4 HVAC zones or a 40-story building with 500 HVAC zones,
Right.
yeah, there's more compute, but we're not adding any additional person in the background. So that's just the capability that comes with AI. And then the real transformative side on the control element, the autonomous control element, is whether I have to generate 4 commands an hour or 4,000 commands an hour. Again, if it was human dependent, et cetera, yeah, we wouldn't be able to do it. But because of the technology, we can do 4,000 decisions an hour in a huge building if we have to.
Yeah.
Today,
Yeah.
it's something we kind of track, but today we're at about 2 million decisions a day, unique decisions for that zone in that building. And because the weather is that and the cost of energy is this, right? It's quite large, right? And the numbers just keep growing.
That's a lot of states.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's new, I mean, this is a bit of a side question, but you mentioned weather, obviously historic data of how the building operates, the kind of the thermal dynamics of the building, occupancy, does that come into play? Are there other sources of data that you look at the future and say, if we knew that, we could dial things in even more?
So we have gone through a wave. So at the core, call it since the beginning, at the core, you had your current weather and weather forecast.
Right.
Again, very granular, not just temperature and humidity, but like everything, wind, angle of the sun, cloud thickness, et cetera, et cetera. So that really detailed for each weather station closest to the building, right? So super granular. Or we're taking in your utility rate structure and ingesting your consumption regularly.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've started working on ingesting pollution. We're ingesting data around the carbon intensity of the electricity you're using as it varies throughout the day because of the grid you're on. Those are, we add and add and add. Occupancy, as you know, what percent of buildings would have occupancy data? It's not a big number.
I know. It's more than it was 10 years ago, but it's still not a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You thought maybe COVID was going to cause a massive adoption, but unfortunately is not. But in retail, for instance, quite prevalent. And by the way, retail is interesting because you can get it a secondary way because there's things like Google Popular Times, which allows you to have a sense of occupancy at different times of the day. Yeah. Or retailers have occupancy related, and where it is, it's we'll take it in. There will be a benefit, but I will say this: the large majority of the benefit comes with the core data we talked about. If there's occupancy, it's adding a little bit more opportunity to do savings and whatnot, load management, etc. Yeah. But people think like that's the bulk. It's not. It really isn't. Like we get the forecast. It's knowing the future. Because again, HVAC system is very reactive, has no other choice but to be reactive. It only knows what's happening now. As soon as you know the future, you've opened up a plethora of opportunities to make different decisions to optimize the building. Right there and then, knowing the future changes everything. And so now at this point, we're just looking to get more and more to deliver more services to customer outside of energy optimization, et cetera, like that carbon intensity of the electricity as it varies throughout the day. An amazing tool, right? An amazing tool.
Yeah. And there's a number, I mean, that's become a bigger theme in that a lot of solar in a sunny area, well, towards the end of the day, you're losing a lot of the solar energy. So, maybe it's coming from a natural gas peaker plant, which obviously has a higher carbon intensity. Yeah.
It's interesting because BrainBox was so early on this. I can't think of many publicly as public as BrainBox that were developing and really bringing AI to the forefront. And the industry is changing, right? But when you look at companies that focus in the areas that BrainBox do, you tend to see a divide. You see companies that will either go heavy into commercial real estate. There's some that do multi-site retail and groceries, and then there's others that may do higher ed and or the mush market, municipalities, university, schools, hospitals. You obviously pivoted whilst continuing commercial real estate. Can we talk about that for a minute? Because that's obviously a big move. It's worked out for you, and there's a couple of other questions I want to ask there, but would love to learn, I guess. I think it was a few years ago you made that transition, or I guess added that asset to what BrainBox can do?
Yeah, I mean, like any startup, time is your enemy, right? You're raising, you're growing, you're investing, you're raising, you're growing, you're investing. So the speed at which you can deploy and grow, matters. And so for us, we were, call it, born 2 years before COVID. We started being public about the technology in 2019, and sure enough, 6 months later happened what happened. And so even at that point there, we kind of continued going and charging ahead, but our end customers had obviously much, much larger issues if you're an office building manager or owner, et cetera. At a certain point, we just saw that retail was responding to technology a lot faster. So we all know in the office setting of the triple net lease situation, that's not there in retail. Retail operates on very thin margins, right? The other thing we noticed is that retailers are public-facing companies, right? So they are communicate with their customers, whether they're private company or publicly listed. They're communicating to the public. They're making commitments with regards to sustainability. So they want to be taking action in a way that's advertising it or showing it in a very public way. So we saw like motivation 1, 2, 3, and 4 were all aligned, and so we decided to do a big push there. And at the beginning, not 100% sure, like what does a small retail site with 3 rooftop units, what is the opportunity? And in the end, though it may be a simple setup, it also means it's not being managed nearly as acutely as an office. There's no on-site staff. The poor people in the central head office of that retailer have to manage, 1,000 sites across the country. So there is, yes, it's a much simpler setup, but it also has worse conditions all around it. And we saw some very large impact there. And certainly what's happening, we're finding, is that as we deliver more and more products, some of them are really hitting home, helping that situation of someone in the central office managing 1,000 locations remotely. So the value keeps coming beyond the initial energy savings.
Right. And even keep going, Lewis. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And when you're talking about data naturally being a key need when you're looking at AI applications, one of the biggest challenges in the industry is fragmentation or silos. There's ultimately clear differences between commercial and multi-site, but is there pros and cons for working in those industries in terms of, is there more fragmentation within multi-site or less that makes adopting AI applications easier?
I'm not sure. Both have their issues. I mean, the benefit of a multi-site retail is that more or less as they're rolling out these stores, there's consistency between, they might have had 2 different control systems over a space of 8 years, but it's 2, as opposed to a portfolio of office property might have 10 different control systems across 100 buildings. So there's that element. But at the end of the day, for us, we all know those hurdles around data in our industry. That's a fact of life. That's not going away. I guess the way we view it is as long as this technology delivers enough value, we never argue very much about payback or return because it is so quick, right? Assuming there's no major upfront CapEx, the ROI is high and the payback is quick. So what the AI has given us is an economic motivation to invest on this challenge in this industry. There's no way around it. I think you guys have seen it undoubtedly. If you're going to propose something to a real estate owner, manager, whatever the case may be, and it's only like a future, well, you should really digitize your entire portfolio and standardize all your data because in the future, some great things will come out of it. No one's buying in this industry, maybe in other industries, but in real estate, your pickup is near zero. But what that AI delivers in the immediate return means that you're paying for that digitization to happen, for that pipe. And then as time goes on, more and more goodies comes out of that situation. But you have to have that initial payback. And so to answer your question, Lewis, that payback was equally as strong in one situation or others, not to say just compare office to retail. There's many, right? And as long as that payback is there, customers generally support it.
Yeah. As it relates to just like different dynamics of different verticals or asset classes, however you want to describe it. One challenge I've heard in the past and maybe I'm interested in your feedback here. Big buildings, you have oftentimes strong teams or large teams that are running the property, and sometimes they just don't want anything to quote unquote replace them, even if really what's happening is they're being supplemented by data and they're going to be able to do their job better. You look at retail, you made a great point, Sam. In the retail site, the store, large or small, there's a general manager, a store manager, someone like that. The last thing they're probably worried about is, are my rooftops in need of repair? Maybe people are uncomfortable and they turn the thermostat and they realize, wait, no, something's going on. But even that, it would take them a while to figure out, I've got a problem. Do you find that kind of works to your advantage, or is it really just go ahead.
I mean, you're right. The way you just described retail, spot on. And you're really giving them data that they desperately need. Otherwise, I'm sitting in the central office. I have the store. I always use Boise, Idaho as the example, calls me, and it's hot. Well, that's nice. Like, what else can you tell me, right? And there's just the poor store manager doesn't have the knowledge. Person in the central office doesn't have the data. What's the only solution oftentimes? Call the truck roll. And then, the costs are what they are, unfortunately, and they're not low, as you know. Well, there we've solved a big pain point. You are also correct on your commentary about the large teams in buildings. And I think over time, we've always had to educate from the start, right? Like, what is AI? What's it really doing? What was the outcome?
Yeah.
And that has been a challenge. The evolution of the industry has helped us because it's just become more commonplace. And like you're saying, it's a dream if you think you can start replacing people in a building. Like, honestly, we all know. Why do you think there's 30% waste on average? It's because people can't get to all the problems. Like, the building managers aren't the Maytag. Yeah, they're not the Maytag repairman just sitting there doing nothing, twiddling their thumbs. They're running around with their hair on fire.
Yeah.
So you're only reducing the fire on their hair a bit more so that they can actually get more done. It's never a case of like, oh, you got 4 people, let's make it 3. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. And well, now adding to that with the labor shortage, I mean, I remember 10, 11 years ago, 12 years ago when I was working at JCI, we had this exact same discussion. Oh, I have somebody doing that manually. Why would I need software? I don't want to replace that person. And it's completely flipped over the past 10 to 15 years where there is a shortage, right? So I think things are moving in the right direction for you and for just technology generally in commercial buildings. But, it's hard to figure out how long will that take. The labor shortage issue seems to be more and more acute.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't know if you guys might have seen, but we're launching now what we call ARIA, which is a virtual engineer for your building. The reaction to that has been really interesting. And exactly to what you're saying, Joe. Like, I didn't, after having to educate years on why autonomous control is very interesting and likely the way of the future in multiple industries, we thought we would have had to do the same with ARIA and this virtual engineer. Quite the opposite. I mean, when people see what the potential is, exactly for the reasons you just said, they've jumped all over it. Sometimes retail faster than others because of the problem is so acute. But the general interest is there because people know we're fighting an uphill battle, and it's not as if like we're getting a wave of people entering the industry. But it's the opposite.
There's more leaving. Yeah, that's interesting. I think that there's often an opportunity miss with some technology vendors out there where they're not creating technology to help bridge the gap versus the opposite.
So by the way, Louis, I will admit to one thing. We were guilty of that at the beginning as well. Because the problem with AI and autonomous controls, it's black box, right? You don't see, you're not supposed to, you shouldn't have to, but you don't see what's happening in the background. So we very much suffered that as well. So we'll say mea culpa for the first year. But as you're accumulating data and AI is getting better, you're able to deliver more and more tools into people's hands. And ARIA, I think, is the ultimate delivery of that, leveraging the data.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because when you think of the end user here, building owners or occupiers, they may have been stung by a different technology, maybe one which isn't as advanced as BrainBox. And we've spoken with numerous individuals that come on this podcast and just in general, and I'm sure you can agree with this, but it is just a change management process, especially when you're bringing forward innovative technology like BrainBox is. Was that the hardest challenge throughout that 3 or 4 year period when you first joined? Or
for sure, I mean, no one should kid themselves when you're doing something for the first time. Like when we were developing the technology at the beginning, I mean, nowadays it's more the knowledge of AI is much more proliferated, thousands upon thousands of people that are studying the technology, using it in real life.
Yeah. Yeah.
7 or 8 years ago, you had a problem. You're not turning left or right to get help. You're just trying to solve it and crash through. And yeah, of course, initial deployments would have gone through all the challenges that you're talking about, and we have our own, like any startup. I don't think any startup can claim not to have any battle scars. Maybe we even have more
Yeah.
than the average, but yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will have thought when they saw the Trane Technologies acquisition as a surprise, and I'll be honest, it was a surprise to me. I thought something big was coming with a couple of the previous moves that you were making. So let's dive into them before we talk about Trane. If I remember correctly, the first one was Turntide's energy and automation business, which was previously called Riptide. What was the need to buy that business at the time?
Sure. I mean, the team, I mean, Riptide is a fairly, it's been around for a number of years. And probably, Joe, you might have been more aware of it. It was in your neck of the woods, right? You're on the West Coast.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
were
lots of-
when we lived in California. They were out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was aware of them.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and, and
Yeah.
look,
Yeah.
I mean, they had over the years developed an impressive product. And for us, it was a good opportunity to kind of bring together their areas of focus and our areas of focus. So that one was very much a technology kind of led thinking. They of
Yeah.
course had customers. They had a great team, which continues to work within the broader BrainBox family, let's say at this point. So that one was definitely more on the technology side and the product complementarity, no doubt, was the lead driver there. And there have been a number of players in the industry. I mean, over the years, I have to say,
Yeah.
when we dug in, we were very impressed with what they had pulled together over the years. The strength of the team was impressive, and what they had pulled together over the years was impressive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I
mean,
agree. I think
their big
Yeah.
push on the cloud BMS. I mean, it's going to be
Yeah.
slow in this industry to go in that direction, but man, what they had pulled together was really impressive.
Yeah, I agree. I think
Yeah.
one of the
That's what I've always heard too. Yeah.
one of the first connections was with the founding team when I joined the space.
Okay.
And pre-Turntide acquisition. Next, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but 18 months later, you then look at ABB's multi-site retail business.
Yeah, it actually reversed those two. The first one was ABB. Sorry, I thought you were working backwards, going back in
No,
there.
you've done me there.
Yeah, the first one 18 months ago was the ABB retail. And that was an interesting opportunity. So ABB had acquired another business, Cylon, that owns this retail-focused business. But this retail-focused business has been around, I want to say, between 25 and 30 years, right?
Yeah,
And
that's about
basically
right.
serving retailers as they expand their footprint with the installation of a heating and lighting control system. What was really interesting for us there was just the history meant that they were connected. I think at the time it was to well over 13,000 buildings, digitally connected to 13,000 buildings.
Yeah.
A connection they maintained in order to deal with issues,
Yeah.
upgrades, et cetera. Well, for us, that was, heaven on earth in a sense, right? Like
Yeah.
so many digitally connected buildings, and to then be able to deploy that AI layer on top that then delivers more and more value in a real fashion to customers that have been using the system as is for 5 years or 10 years. So there was a real opportunity there of that digitally connected base to bring them a whole bunch, especially when it mattered.
Yeah.
When they installed it 10
Yeah.
years ago, was anybody asking you to measure GHG emissions? I don't think so. But
Yeah.
then today is do something, reduce your footprint, measure GHG emissions. And they're looking at all these problems saying, what do I need to do? Add. And then when you could present them that holistic solution,
Yeah.
we just put out the case study from Dollar Tree literally days ago.
Yeah.
Yep. Saw that. Yeah.
And so they great customer relationship there, trusted us with a first batch of 600 stores, which is nothing to balk at.
Yeah.
And now we're showing that value and now getting to much larger ways in a way that is very financially cost effective, right? We're not running around having to spend technicians to install this or that. You're just digitally enabling this big install base. So that was an exciting one as well.
And across the industry, not just small sites, I think one of the key themes there's not as much churn from vendor to vendor. So I guess you didn't explicitly say this, Sam, but my sense is like the cost and like the battles you'd have to go through to close all those buildings. You probably looked at it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but might have said, "Hey, we can just buy these buildings. Like they're already on they're on our team or they're on our platform," and that seems highly impactful. Just because a lot of owners of building equipment, they tend to just kind of like what they have, even if they don't love it. They like it enough to not replace it, and I think that's a challenge for the industry, not a challenge for any individual company. But that seems to be another theme here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just speeds up the potential to deploy. That's for sure. I mean, almost all the businesses we deal with, the one thing we got to keep in mind is that the service we provide, though impactful and we like to think important.
Yeah.
I'm a retailer. I'm not going to make or break my business by getting the HVAC system just right. I mean, I got a million and one decisions that are so.
Right.
In a way, if you can deliver to them fast, low cost, et cetera, then the opportunity is there. In some cases, people have to upgrade their systems. Then you get into the whole cycle, and the sales cycle is long, and it's CapEx. And of course, they're only going to release the CapEx year by year, and so on and so forth. But when you can go after a digitally connected portfolio of buildings, I mean, the financial case is just tremendous.
Yeah, and I heard from a building owner the other week that his budget is no longer multi-year cycle; it's year by year, which just makes it incredibly challenging to be able to budget these things in.
Yeah. That's the other. I mean, we hope to create budget as well, right? The ROI is fast in cases like this, so you are even creating digital financial capacity, right? Quickly, not 5 years out, like quickly.
Yeah, well, you think the commercial building owners' budgets are tight? I imagine multi-site retail is even tighter. They've got some fine margins from what I know. So at that point, let's say rewind 3 months, 4 months. Where was BrainBox at in terms of like headcount? You've obviously made a couple of strategic acquisitions. You've now got even more buildings directly on the platform. Just give us a picture as to where you guys were pre-acquisition.
Yeah. So we had grown the team organically mainly, but also via the acquisition to about a couple of hundred people. Again, Montreal's our head office, but we have people spread across the rest of Canada and the United States, a couple of people abroad or a few people abroad. We had completed those two acquisitions, the digitally connected building count, grew rapidly, and then through which you're now working to deploy the AI overlay, if we could put it that way. And we were continuing to grow and innovate. That's for sure. I guess that's kind of where we got it. I don't know I guess your next question is what led to discussions, I presume, or.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big move. About 2 weeks before you announced the acquisition, I'd posted about frustration from the space and quote unquote the big incumbents making acquisitions or not making acquisitions and potentially not changing to benefit the space. And I said, why do they need to? They've got a phenomenal business model. And with Trane acquiring BrainBox, it came as a surprise because it's a very well thought of business, both in terms of the product, but also how you guys have produced the business over the last couple of years. So I guess to start simply, what went into this in terms of like key drivers?
Sure. I mean, you probably saw about a year before that. So now we're going back a year and 3 or 4 months. We have been working closely with Trane over the last few years, and they launched Trane Autonomous Control powered by BrainBox AI. So there's been a lot of work between the teams over the years. I will say this: culture matters a lot at our shop at BrainBox, and so we got to know their culture very, very well. Don't know how you view the Trane in its position with competitors, but they put themselves forward a lot when it comes to sustainability, right? Like
Well, they've made some moves towards that as well to really, especially when you talk about climate and GST.
Yeah, it's been a big theme the past couple of years, for them.
Yeah. And so for us, like our motto is literally saving the planet with AI. Like it's tattooed on every part of our body, actually, to the extreme, right? And we have people that work for us that are just, the talent is amazing, and an important part of that is the mission, right? We believe we're here to make a difference as well. So that meeting of the cultures, having worked with them a couple of years, starting 2-3 years ago, meant that we knew the team very well. But so when that opportunity came up, that mattered a lot, I will say. At the end of the day, too, I mean, scale and impact are the two words that kind of guide us. Scale, we can handle internally, right? Like we'll make the technology to be as flexible as possible, to plug into as many, BMS or control systems as possible, to hit as many building types as possible, and that never stops. That part of it, we can work on, but to actually get the impact, as you know, like as much as having 15,000 buildings is impressive, there are millions of buildings on this planet, right? Millions upon millions.
Millions in just America,
in just America, exactly.
Tens of millions, and I would say probably
around the world. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So for us at the end of the day too, when the opportunity arose, it was also a discussion to say, folks, in 4 or 5 years, do we want to get into millions of buildings, or do we want to stay in the tens of thousands, or maybe a
Yeah.
couple of
Yeah. That's
hundred
a good point.
thousand?
Big impact.
Yeah, so that was a critical part. So when we're able to, we knew them well. The culture matches, the same importance
Hmm.
around sustainability, and then you having that internal reflection. So that was that the key parts of our logic. They also Trane is interesting because I think they are the one that advertised their digital platform maybe the least over the years, but
Yeah.
had the biggest building count by a country mile. Like someone presciently at Trane decided years and years ago to say, okay, if we're selling buildings, let's just digitally connect them to the cloud. So quietly
Yeah.
over years and years, they just accumulated a large installed base of buildings. Amazing. I mean, we're back to
Yeah.
the discussion we had 5 minutes ago. Just think of the impact that can be had with that platform.
Yeah. Yeah. I know they bought a company, it must have been like 8 or 10 years ago, Agilus Energy, that I think was part of that initiative, getting the buildings into the cloud. But yeah, I think you're right. When you look at the cloud platform that every of their peers has, they're all kind of have a branded cloud platform. Whereas Trane, I mean, obviously they have some technology there. They're a big enough company. They're not just sitting on the sidelines, but I don't think they've made nearly as much of a marketing push if you simplify and just say, the marketing is not nearly as much as their peers. So that's a valid point.
Yeah. No, but at the end of the day, where they got to was more impressive than the marketing, right?
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean,
Yeah.
less marketing and the product speaks for itself.
More doing.
It's refreshing. So with BrainBox already partnering with Trane prior to the acquisition, and Trane ultimately white labeling BrainBox's product, how does the acquisition now change the relationship? Because are you now just really enabling both businesses to push this out to all of Trane's offices and globally, or will BrainBox still remain a separate entity but within the Trane family?
Yeah, I mean, what was also when we talked about decision factors, an important one as well is just the appreciation for what the team has built, and also the ecosystem. When we started 7 years ago, AI was a thing, but it's not a thing like it is today.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so then also the importance of the team and access to the talent. And unfortunately, when we talk about marketing not too well, Canada doesn't do too well marketing the fact that there's always the three godfathers of AI that people talk about. Well, one of them's based here in Montreal, Joshua Bengio. Another one, Jeffrey Hinton's based in Toronto. The third one being Jan LeCun with Meta based on the West Coast. So there is a deep pool of talent here in Montreal, and we benefit from that, both building our own team, but also engaging with the ecosystem. These large research centers that we cooperate with. There's one called Mila. There's one called Ivedo.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Montreal, huge, amazing collaboration we have going on here. So I think, in our discussions, it was positive to see that Trane recognized that pool of talent in-house, but then even around us. And so for us, it was also an important element that they want to continue growing and investing in the team, and making of Montreal the AI kind of center, if I could put it that way. So that was an important decision factor for us.
Okay, so it's almost like the Trane is going to use Montreal as the AI innovation hub to keep driving this forward, a part of the digital services team.
Yeah, no, and there's a big cooperation there, right? Let's just be very clear. We've been working with the digital services team, like I said, for over 2 years now. So a very big cooperation for the AI specific capabilities. I mean, the challenge is, you can imagine what has happened over the last 18 months since ChatGPT was released, the first release. I mean, the chasing for talent, the need for talent, the demand for talent has just exploded, not just grown, has just exploded. Here we have an amazing team and amazing resources around us that, again, I think we undermarket. Silicon Valley is phenomenal at marketing.
Yeah.
And in Canada, we undermarket it like crazy, but there's amazing pools of talent.
Yeah. And when I was going to ask one quick follow-up, the digital services point is interesting. We've talked today about the fact that there's a labor shortage, and I've heard that from the operators in the buildings that are part of whatever the company owning the building. So we have our own facility teams. I've also interestingly heard it from some of the service providers that say we don't have the staff we need to service the buildings. When you look at digital services, I would assume, but I'd like to ask, you see it as we, as BrainBox, as part of Trane, can deliver solutions to the self-performers, is a term we used to use at JCI. Like, I'm going to operate my own building. I just want your tools. and also the actual Trane employees that can now use these technologies to deliver, better outcomes in general. You're looking at both and
Well,
anything that kind of fits in between. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think ARIA is a real step change there as well. So whereas the autonomous control, I mean, you need to have an asset to plug it into,
Yeah.
the benefit from. You could, if you're a facility management firm, be a reseller of it in theory, et cetera.
Yeah.
But ARIA changes the game for everybody, including facility management firms as well. I mean, what's coming on generative AI, everyone is keeping an eye out for. I mean, ARIA will transform and hopefully help alleviate that shortage in a very big way. Like the efficiency gains for facility management firms from a product like ARIA, we're not talking single digits percentages.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a tremendous uplift and a desperately needed one as well. Like, what's the stat? 400,000 HVAC technicians in I don't know if it's just US or all of North America, and the shortage is about 100,000. I mean, that's a crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
I've seen other. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think every technician, whether it's controls or HVAC, if they wanted to find a job, they'd have at least 7 or 8 choices.
Yeah.
So
the average age is really high, right? That's the other stat, where it's like the average age over 50, I think. Yeah. So,
and what we love about what we're seeing with a product like ARIA as well, you make each person more efficient. So something that took you 2 hours to diagnose and get to the solution set could maybe be collapsed to minutes, like 20 minutes or 10 minutes. But it also uplifts the skill levels too. So, you hire someone new into the industry, you don't have to wait 4 years for that skill level to go up through work. Like, you can really boost that skill level growth really quickly in this scenario here. So it helps on both ends.
Nice. So what does the acquisition mean for customers? Because I'm sure you can appreciate, with some acquisitions, there may be a concern that customer service may drop. I'm not saying that, and there's no issue as to why that would happen with BrainBox, but I imagine for using digital services, but also being a part of Trane's brand, that should only mean good things for customers.
Yeah, I think anyone can conclude that the service you get from a 200-person team is going to be slightly improved from a team that now has 46,000 strong behind it. So no, I mean that element, again, the importance of investing in the team and the technology we've built. There's continuity there, and just you now have a broader reach. I mean, we do so much at BrainBox, but we have our limits, very fairly defined limits. Now the offering can certainly be much more complete and broad. And you got to also think, when you're dealing with a startup, there's fundraising cycles until the company gets big enough, et cetera, et cetera. Well, those are no longer a concern either. So
nice.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
With something that you mentioned before, the acquisition and making sure it was a good fit, one of the points was the ambition of not just being in X amount of buildings. I mean, you can tell me how many buildings BrainBox is deployed in if you want, but the ambition to be deployed in 1 million, 10 million, whatever the number looks like. What is the goal, let's say, next 5 years for BrainBox?
I mean, that's a good question. I could tell you the goal is massively larger. I don't. We
How
haven't
many
really
zeros?
Yeah, exactly.
It's okay.
How many zeros, right? So the reach of the commercial team is obviously enormous, right? Like if our commercial team's 20 people, you'd be lucky it gets that high, right? And now it's in the thousands. Also geographic reach. So though we are been pretty good at deploying internationally, in kind of onesies and twosies fashion, you have entire teams abroad as well. So it really is, like we're really adding zeros. We're not adding, double digit percentages. We're adding zeros. And we're only going to make a difference if we get to that. I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but some days, we're quite intensely interested in talking about the climate. It keeps getting worse every year. You only have to look at the natural disasters. Good. Well, electric vehicles are there. There might have been a slowdown in the pickup in electric vehicles in the last year, but they keep getting better. They keep getting cheaper, and they're on a path. The charging station's getting bigger, et cetera. So that's moving. No one's building a coal plant in a developed nation, as far as I know. So renewables are there. They're cheaper, more readily available. There's no more doubt. It's just a matter of how fast we build them. The built environment's a problem. The built environment is one of the big categories. It's not moving nearly fast enough.
When you look at it compared to renewables or some of the other industries, it doesn't really get looked at. It's often forgotten about, even though it's one of the largest emitters.
It's huge. And I say, like, give credit where credit's due. I can think of one product category in the built environment that is moving at a good pace, and those are heat pumps. If you guys disagree, Or you could
Yeah.
think of
No, I
another
think
one.
heat pumps are though. I would put heat pumps more in the consumer side.
That
There are
too.
heat pumps for any type of building at this point, but the focus, I think, where you see more adoption is on the consumer side. There's definitely been a lot of companies that have popped up and have said, and I was surprised to see this, that have said, we're building our own heat pump. Like, we're actually physically building our own heat pump, not just a thermostat, which is relatively easy, I would think, compared to a heat pump. But you're right. In buildings, heat pumps are probably where you're seeing the adoption. I mean, I guess smart thermostats, but those really are incremental. I mean, we have a smart thermostat. We curtail a little bit of energy in the summers because here in Colorado, it can get hot, especially at the end of the day as the sun is going down. But yeah, it's just not been as much. I think my quick answer for you, and this is something that I think about too, is that buildings, just the systems, the integration between systems, the integration from hardware, software, and services, it's kind of a web of providers and solutions and service providers that makes it harder. Where with a car, once you have the infrastructure to charge, which is a huge cost,
Yeah.
but you sell your car. I'm just pointing at like out at our driveway and like looking down at our car and like sell that car, get an EV. All I would have to do is get a charger. And actually there's a charger up at the block at a park that the city here has charging. So I mean, I agree. We haven't adopted, like the adoption curve is not nearly where it should be. The adoption curve is not nearly what it is compared to a lot of other comparable industries. That's the closest thing I can think of as to why, because it's not just that people don't care, people don't get it. People, it's like there are some drivers there that I think make it harder. So
It's hard, right?
yeah,
In addition to the AI, probably our biggest challenge, I can't even say sometimes it feels even bigger than using AI for the first time,
Mm.
is that connectivity piece, right? And we've
yeah,
invested years to grow that connectivity piece. That agnostic stance takes time and money to
yeah,
solve, and we continue to do that. So our objective is to continue to be able to agnostically provide a
yeah,
solution to whatever kind of control system you have in place. And we keep going. Turntide added to that. The
yeah,
ABB retail acquisition added to that. Our ownership within the Trane family adds to that. It's the only way we're going
yeah,
to win. We're going to win this game. We will not stop growing that connectivity. Never.
yeah,
We'll never run
yeah,
out
yeah.
of time.
Which,
Well,
yeah,
we've loved hearing about it. I appreciate it's a
yeah.
super busy
Thank you,
time,
Sam.
but at the same time, incredibly exciting. And as I've mentioned many times, congratulations to you and your team. With Aria and just BrainBox in general, assuming no one knows who you guys are, where's the best place to find anything from
Uh,
you?
I mean, I would have normally have answered. You just have to go to our website, brainboxai.com. But now you can call any Train rep, and you'll also get
Yeah,
a
There
quick
we go.
answer as well. So the reach is slightly bigger now, but
yeah. Incrementally. Yeah,
incremental. Yeah. But thank you guys,
Well,
and please don't stop with the
yeah, yeah,
work of this podcast. Awareness and all for everything we just talked about is essential. So keep going. Don't stop, please.
yeah.
thanks for your
Thank
time,
you.
guys.
Thank you for being here.